Strapped to the gurney in the Texas execution chamber, the final seconds of his life counting down.
Huntsville, Texas, the Walls Unit. Behind these concrete walls is America's busiest execution room. Since 1976, Texas has killed more people as punishment than any other state. Over 580 people have taken their final walk down this hallway. But here's what makes this story different. Most people on death row are older, tougher criminals. Michael Perry was just 19 years old when he did the crimes that would eventually kill him. Some people murder for money. Others kill for revenge or because of strong feelings. But Michael Perry killed 3 innocent people for something most of us use every day: cars. On October 24, 2001, 2 teenagers decided they needed better cars to drive. What happened next would shock even police officers who had seen many crimes. In less than 24 hours, Michael Perry and his friend Jason Burkett would turn a quiet Texas town into a crime scene that still bothers police officers today. 3 victims: a 50-year-old nurse, her 16-year-old son, his 18-year-old best friend, all dead because 2 young men wanted to drive something nicer. But here's the twist that makes this case even more disturbing. Both killers were caught. Both admitted what they did. Both were found guilty of the same crimes. Yet only one of them would die for what they did together. The other is still alive in prison today and could get out in 2041. How does a judge decide which teenager lives and which one dies? What happened in that courtroom that saved one killer's life while sealing the other's fate? Before we dive into this story, like this video and hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear will show you just how quickly a normal life can turn into unthinkable violence. This is the story of Michael Perry and the night that 3 families lost everything over 2 stolen cars. Michael Perry never had a fair start in life. His teenage birth mother gave him up for adoption. And while his new parents loved him deeply, they had no idea what they were getting into. By 1st grade, doctors said Michael had attention deficit disorder. His mind couldn't focus, couldn't sit still. But that was just the beginning. In 7th grade, the diagnosis got worse: oppositional defiant disorder. By 8th grade, it was conduct disorder. Each label was just a fancy way of saying the same thing. Michael was becoming dangerous. His adoptive parents tried everything: counseling, therapy, mental hospitals. Nothing worked. Michael stole his mother's jewelry and tried to sell it. He crashed the family van into a mailbox. He broke into neighbors' homes just to destroy things, tearing wallpaper and carving up wooden trim. When regular schools couldn't handle him, his desperate parents sent him to Boys Town in Nebraska, a reform school for troubled kids. But even there, Michael's darkness showed through. After just 3 months, he made a threat that scared everyone who heard it. He told a staff member, "You people work here. I don't know why people like me are going to rape or kill your kids." They immediately moved him to the locked section for 4 months. But Michael wasn't getting better. He was getting worse. His parents made one last attempt to save him. They sent him to Casa by the Sea, a private treatment center in Mexico for American kids with serious problems. Michael graduated high school there, but the moment he turned 18, he walked away from the program and never looked back. What happened next was a nightmare. Michael ended up homeless on the streets of San Diego, with no ID, no job skills, and no idea how to survive. He made choices that would haunt him forever. An older man offered him shelter in exchange for sexual favors. Michael later admitted, "If I had the choice between starving or selling myself, I'm going to sell myself." Drugs became his escape. He stole prescription pills and sold them to feed his addiction. When his adoptive parents offered to let him come home if he got a job, Michael chose the streets instead. Jason Burkett's childhood was pure horror from day one. His mother used methamphetamine while pregnant with him, damaging his brain before he was even born. After birth, she neglected her children, often leaving the oldest sibling to raise the younger ones. But the real monster in Jason's life was his father, Delbert Burkett. Delbert was a career criminal who turned their home into a war zone. Jason watched his father beat his mother regularly. He saw him shoot her with a pellet gun. On at least one occasion, he witnessed his father rape his mother. The abuse wasn't limited to his mother. Delbert beat Jason and his siblings regularly. The older siblings, damaged by their own trauma, passed the violence down to Jason. Their house ran on food stamps and fear. Despite all this horror, Jason still looked up to his father. That's how twisted his world had become. The man who destroyed his family was still his hero. In the months before October 2001, Michael, Perry, and Jason Burkett found each other. Two broken 19-year-olds with nothing to lose and everything to prove. They bonded over drugs, crime, and a shared anger at the world. Michael was already spiraling fast. In May 2001, police arrested him for shooting at a house, just firing bullets at someone's home for no reason. By October 2nd, he was arrested again for trying to use a fake prescription to get 100 Xanax pills. He was clearly desperate for drugs and money. Jason was dealing with his own demons. Years of watching his father's violence had taught him that taking what you want was normal. Hurting people to get it was just part of life. Together, they made a dangerous combination. Michael had the reckless anger. Jason had learned that violence was the solution to every problem. Both were broke, both were addicted, and both were running out of options. That's when they started talking about cars. Nice cars, the kind that people with money drove around the wealthy neighborhoods near Lake Conroe. Michael and Jason were tired of walking everywhere or borrowing beat-up trucks. They wanted something better, and they knew exactly where to find it. The conversation that would doom three innocent people probably started simple. We need better rides. But in the minds of two damaged teenagers with no moral compass, that innocent wish became a deadly plan. Neither of them had any idea that their desire for better transportation would end with three bodies and two very different fates. Sandra Stotler had built a good life for herself and her son. At 50 years old, she worked as a nurse at Conroe Regional Medical Center, helping sick people get better every day. She was the kind of person who dedicated her life to caring for others. Sandra lived in the Bentwater subdivision near Lake Conroe, one of those gated communities where people move to feel safe, beautiful homes. Well-maintained lawns, the kind of neighborhood where kids could ride bikes without parents worrying. Sandra had worked hard to give her 16-year-old son, Adam, this kind of life. Adam Stotler was a typical teenager. He had friends, went to school, and was close to his mother. Like most kids his age, he loved cars. His mother had bought him a white Isuzu Rodeo to drive, nothing too fancy, but reliable transportation for a responsible kid. Sandra herself drove a red Camaro. It wasn't the newest model, but it was sporty and eye-catching. To Sandra, it was just her car. To Michael, Perry, and Jason Burkett, it represented everything they wanted but couldn't have. Jeremy Richardson was 18 years old and Adam's best friend. He was the kind of kid who was always welcome at the Stotler house. Sandra treated him like a second son, and Jeremy looked up to Adam like a younger brother. On October 24th, Jeremy was just hanging out with his best friend. It's probably planning their weekend like any other teenagers. Maybe they'd go to a movie, drive around town, or just play video games, normal teenage stuff. Jeremy had no idea that two strangers had been watching the Stotler house. He didn't know that someone had decided his friend's family had too much and needed to be robbed. He couldn't have imagined that wanting to help someone in trouble would cost him his life. From the outside, the Stotlers looked like they had everything Michael and Jason wanted. A nice house in a safe neighborhood, two decent cars, a stable family with money to spend on nice things. But what Michael and Jason saw as wealth was really just the result of Sandra's hard work. She wasn't rich. She was a single mother who worked long hours at the hospital to provide for her son. The cars weren't luxury vehicles. They were practical transportation for a working mom and her teenage son. The tragic irony is that Sandra Stotler probably would have helped Michael and Jason if they had just asked. As a nurse, she spent her days helping people in crisis. If two troubled teenagers had knocked on her door, asking for food or help finding jobs, she might have tried to point them in the right direction. Instead, they saw her as a target. They reduced a caring mother and her innocent son to obstacles standing between them and the cars they wanted. On October 24, 2001, Sandra was probably thinking about her shift at the hospital the next day. Adam was probably excited about his plans with Jeremy. Jeremy was just being a good friend. None of them knew that two desperate teenagers had already decided their fate. Michael, Perry, and Jason Burkett had it all figured out. They would drive to Sandra Stotler's house in Jason's girlfriend's truck and ask to spend the night. Simple, friendly, nothing suspicious about two young guys needing a place to crash. The plan was almost innocent in its simplicity. Wait for the family to fall asleep. Quietly take the car keys and drive away with both the red Camaro and the Isuzu Rodeo. By morning, they'd be long gone with their new rides, and the Stotlers would just file an insurance claim. Nobody was supposed to get hurt. It was just going to be theft. When they arrived at Sandra's house that evening, everything seemed to be going according to plan. Sandra answered the door and recognized Michael. He was an acquaintance of her son, Adam. She was polite, even welcoming. But then Sandra told them something that changed everything. Adam wouldn't be home for another 2 hours. This created a problem. The original plan required the whole family to be asleep. With Adam gone, they couldn't just wait around for hours without raising suspicion. Sandra might start asking questions. She might call Adam to check when he'd be back. Michael and Jason started to leave. They got back in the truck and began driving away from the house. But somewhere between Sandra's front door and the street, desperation took over. They had come this far. They had seen the cars. They knew Sandra was alone. Why wait for the perfect moment when they could just take what they wanted right now? Michael and Jason parked the truck down the street and walked back to Sandra's house. They had crossed a line in their minds from thieves to something much worse. Jason would distract Sandra at the front door while Michael snuck inside through the garage. Michael grabbed a shotgun they had brought with them. The plan was no longer about waiting for anyone to fall asleep. Michael crept through Sandra's house like a predator. He knew the layout well enough to find the laundry room where he hid and waited. Sandra had no idea that death was lurking just feet away from her normal evening routine. Michael knocked on the back door from inside the house. When Sandra came to see who was there, he was ready. The first shotgun blast hit Sandra before she could even process what was happening. The woman who spent her days saving lives at the hospital was suddenly fighting for her own. But Sandra Stotler was stronger than Michael expected. Even with a shotgun wound, she tried to get up. She was still fighting, still trying to survive. That's when Michael fired the second shot. This time, Sandra Stotler didn't get back up. Michael and Jason covered her body with sheets from her own home. They loaded her into the truck like she was furniture they were moving. Then they drove to Crater Lake and dumped her body in the water, watching it sink beneath the surface. But they weren't done. Michael still wanted that red Camaro, but he couldn't find the keys anywhere in the house. Sandra's murder had been for nothing if they couldn't get what they came for. So they made another decision that would seal their fate. They would come back later and get both cars from Adam when he returned home. 3 hours earlier, Sandra Stotler had been a working mother looking forward to seeing her son. Now she was floating dead in a lake, and her killers were planning to murder her child too. Michael and Jason drove to Conroe and picked up Jason's girlfriend, Kristen Willis. Now, there were 3 of them in the truck heading back to the Bentwater subdivision where Sandra's body was already growing cold in Crater Lake. The gated community presented a new problem. They didn't know the entry code and the security gate wouldn't let them in. So they parked outside and waited for Adam to come home. While they sat in the dark, they came up with their story. They would tell Adam that a friend of theirs had accidentally shot himself in the woods and needed help. It was the kind of emergency that would make any decent person want to help immediately. When Adam's white Isuzu Rodeo finally appeared at the gate, Jeremy Richardson was with him. The 2 teenagers had probably spent the evening doing normal teenage things, maybe seeing a movie, hanging out at someone's house, or just driving around talking about their futures. They had no idea they were driving toward their deaths. Michael and Jason flagged them down with their emergency story. A friend was hurt in the woods. They needed help right away. Could Adam and Jeremy follow them to where their friend was bleeding? Adam and Jeremy didn't hesitate. When someone needs help, you help them. That's how they were raised. That's what good people do. They followed the truck toward the wooded area, probably talking about how they could help, maybe worried about how badly hurt this mysterious friend was. Kristen Willis stayed in the truck. She would later testify that she was scared of Jason, but she didn't try to warn the boys. She just watched as they walked into the woods with 2 killers. What happened next was pure evil disguised as helpfulness. Jason Burkett shot Jeremy Richardson first. The 18-year-old probably never saw it coming. One moment he was trying to help someone. The next moment he was dying in the dirt. Then Jason walked back to where Adam was waiting and asked him a chilling question. "Did you hear those gunshots?" Adam probably felt his stomach drop. Something was very wrong. But Jason told him he would take him to find the others. And Adam, still hoping his friend Jeremy was okay, followed him deeper into the woods. That's when Jason Burkett shot Adam Stotler 3 times. The 16-year-old who had just been trying to help someone died next to his best friend in the Texas woods. 2 teenagers who had their whole lives ahead of them were now just bodies on the ground. Michael Perry walked over to Adam's corpse and rifled through his pockets, taking his wallet and car keys like he was shopping. Then he and Jason drove away in the Isuzu Rodeo, leaving 2 dead boys behind. But they weren't finished with their night of horror. They drove back to Sandra's house, and Michael finally got what he had killed for, the keys to the red Camaro. With Sandra dead in the lake and her son dead in the woods, Michael Perry finally had his prize. He drove off in the Camaro while Jason followed in the rodeo. Then, as if 3 murders weren't enough for one night, they went to a nightclub to celebrate. For 2 days, Michael Perry thought he had gotten away with triple murder. He drove around in Sandra's stolen Camaro like it was his own car, probably feeling proud of what he had accomplished. But on October 26th, his luck ran out. A police officer spotted him committing a traffic violation in the red Camaro. When the officer tried to pull him over, Michael panicked and led police on a high-speed chase through the streets. The chase ended when Michael crashed the car and tried to run away on foot. Police caught him quickly, and when they searched his pockets, they found Adam Stotler's wallet. Michael was so arrogant that he gave police Adam's name when they arrested him. He was booked into jail as Adam Stotler and released on bond. The next day, October 27th, a horrifying discovery changed everything. Someone found Sandra Stotler's body floating in Crater Lake. The nurse who had dedicated her life to helping others was now a murder victim. Police immediately started looking for her son, Adam, and her missing cars. They had no idea that the person they were looking for was already dead in the woods, or that his killer had been arrested using his name. On October 29th, Michael's paranoia reached a breaking point. He showed up at Kristen Willis's house with a loaded shotgun and pointed it at her head. His words were chilling. "I have already killed somebody." "It's not going to hurt me to kill anyone else." Kristen was terrified, but she didn't call police. Not yet. The final act came on October 30th, Montgomery County. Sheriff's deputies spotted the stolen Isuzu Rodeo at a truck stop. Michael and Jason were inside, probably thinking they were safe. They were wrong. Their killing spree was about to end. And their real nightmare was just beginning, when police finally cornered Michael Perry and Jason Burkett at that truck stop. Their desperate escape attempt told the whole story. They hit a sheriff's deputy with a stolen car while trying to flee, but the officer managed to shoot out their back tire. The rodeo crashed into a nearby store, and both killers tried to run on foot with their shotgun. They didn't get far. At the police station, detectives read Michael his Miranda rights and began questioning him. What happened next shocked even experienced investigators. Michael didn't just confess. He gave them every gruesome detail of the triple murder. He told them exactly how he hid in Sandra's laundry room with the shotgun. He described shooting her twice when she came to the door. He explained how they covered her body with sheets and dumped her in Crater Lake. He walked them through the lie they told Adam and Jeremy about their friend being hurt in the woods. Most chilling of all, Michael described watching Jason shoot both boys and then stealing Adam's wallet and keys from his dead body. He even told them about going to the nightclub afterward to celebrate. The confession was so detailed that only someone was actually there could have known these facts. Michael knew things about the crime scene that hadn't been released to the public. He knew exactly where the bodies were found and how they had been killed. But the confession wasn't the only evidence against him. Crime scene investigators found Michael's DNA on a cigarette, but underneath one of the victims. Physical evidence doesn't lie, and it placed Michael Perry at the scene of the murders. However, Michael's story started changing almost immediately after his confession. Once he realized the serious trouble he was in, he began claiming that detectives had forced him to confess. He said they physically intimidated him and coerced him into admitting to crimes he didn't commit. Then Michael tried a different strategy. He started blaming everything on Jason Burkett. According to Michael's new version of events, Jason was the real killer who had manipulated him into being there. Michael claimed he was just an innocent bystander who got caught up in Jason's violent rampage. The problem with Michael's new story was that the evidence didn't support it. His DNA was at the crime scene. His confession contained details that only the killer would know. Witnesses had seen him with the stolen cars and the victims' belongings. Most damaging of all, Kristen Willis was ready to testify about what she had witnessed that night. She had been in the truck when they lured the boys to the woods. She had seen Michael threaten her with a loaded shotgun afterward. She knew the truth about what both men had done. Michael Perry could change his story all he wanted, but the evidence against him was overwhelming to make the legal process simpler. Prosecutors decided to try Michael Perry and Jason Burkett separately for different murders. Michael would be tried for killing Sandra Stotler, while Jason would be tried for killing Jeremy Richardson. Both faced the death penalty. Michael's trial began in February 2003, more than a year after the murders. The prosecution's case was devastating. They played Michael's detailed confession for the jury, showing how calmly he described shooting an innocent woman in her own home. The DNA evidence was undeniable. Michael's cigarette butt found at the crime scene proved he had been there. Crime scene photos showed the brutal reality of what Sandra Stotler had endured. Kristen Willis testified about what she had witnessed that night and Michael's threatening behavior afterward. Her testimony painted a picture of a cold-blooded killer who felt no remorse for what he had done. Michael's defense team tried to argue that his confession had been coerced by police. They claimed he was young and scared and had been pressured into admitting to crimes he didn't commit. But the jury didn't buy it. After just 2 hours of deliberation, they found Michael Perry guilty of capital murder.